Okay, here is Andrea Hairston, who's come to read for us from her new book, and the book is called Master of Poisons. Andrea, you said you started out writing a novella,
Yes.
and this is interesting because this is not a short book.
No.
So tell the story of the book.
Well, so someone at Tord.com, Carl Engel-Laird, said, "Hey, have you ever written a novella? Would you like to try?" And I was like, "Sure, why not?" I mean, I don't think I can write a novella, because I can't really even write a short story. But a novella is like up to 40,000 words, so maybe that will help me get beyond the usual that I have for short stories. And then I tried and I tried, and I got to 40,000 words and I was nowhere near done with this story. I mean, absolutely nowhere near. But I kept trying to cram it all in and cut out things. And so then I wrote to Carl and I said, okay, this is not going to be a novella. Would you read it if it were a novel? And he said, yes. So then I stopped trying to write a novella. And all the critique that I'd been getting of the book was really that the story is too big and you're cramming it in. So those were no longer critiques. It's just, oh, well, let me solve like that story background problem by showing you what I really meant that I put in a sentence that should have been 3 chapters. So I kept growing the book from the original idea, which turned out to be actually the outline for the book, right? So the novella, or the shorter version, was the outline. And then I filled it in and answered all the questions that I needed to answer, developed the characters and the world and the language and the cultures, so that the same story that I was trying to tell could be told, but in, I don't know, 100,000 words or 110,000 words, something like that. So, and then Tor bought it, Tor.com, so that was really exciting. They, Roxy Chen read it and said, oh, well, yeah, we can do this. So, and then now I have Lee Harris who helped me polish it. So just, really a happy end, even though I failed at writing the novella, but I got it into the epic form.
You have no idea how familiar a story this is.
I suspected that there were other people out there like me trying to make it short. And if it were a film, I think I could have made it, a long film. But that still would have turned into a 500-page novel, right? So, yeah.
Well, it's such a complex world. And you thought you were going to fit this into 40,000 words. Tell me something about the way you developed the world.
Well, I started with the premise that the poison desert was blowing across an empire. So I started with a kind of visual image. So I actually saw the poison desert blowing and things desiccating and dying. And then so that's where I began. And the reason this poison desert was blowing was the people. It wasn't like, nature being mean. It was things that people had done that did that. So I started with an idea, that here's a culture that has, I don't know, like Easter Island, chopped down all of its trees, or like our culture, monoculture planning all over, the West when we had the Dust Bowl, right? And what we continue to do. So I started with that idea that this was, and then I decided I didn't know, well, who are they or what are they or anything. I then went to character. Who responds to it? So the lead character, Jola, thinks we've got to do something now. And he's been, saying we've got to change since the wind started blowing. And people didn't listen to him. So, and then I had a young girl, Awa, who's the other major character, who's growing up um, among the people. You know, her father was a farmer. So she's growing up and she has an affinity for bees and weeds and wild things. And so does Jola. So they were two similar characters. And she doesn't set out to save the world. She's just, trying to learn how to be a storyteller and relating to these creatures. And so I started with then the characters. And then I said, okay, so who are they though? I know she's into bees, but what's her world? Who are her people? What's going on with her? And then Jola, like he's talking to the emperor, but the emperor's not listening. Who is he? And so from the characters, they told me who they were. Like I'm from this group of people, and we live up here, and we do this, and I was from this other group of people, and then there are these other groups of people that we all engage with. So from the idea about the poison desert, and I also had Jola having, power. Each of them has a power. So Jola could touch something and understand stuff about it. So that comes into the book. And Awa can go to Smokeland, which is another dimension to this world. And when you're in Smokeland, you experience things that when you come back to the everyday, you can use. It offers insight. It's amazing place. So I had those things, and then I wanted to know, okay, so what is this place, Smokeland, and why can he touch things and know these things? So I had to figure out what is the conjure system that Jola is using, and what is this Smokeland place, and how does it relate to the wind blowing across the land? So from those things, I then developed everything else.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of the opposite of the way so many people develop a world. They start with the world, and you start with the characters.
Always. I know, I start with an idea. First idea, then characters, then world. Because the characters tell me what the world is. They speak their language, they offer me, what their preferences are, what they eat, how they think, what they do, what their history is. So from character, I get to world.
Mm.
And then there are other people in that world too. So yeah.
Yeah, Jola's brother and Samina, his wife, and
yeah, all of those people then become, and the emperor, who's the emperor, and family, and what does it mean that she wants to be a storyteller, a griot, and who teaches you how to do that, and what cultures have griots, and what do griots do? So once I have her intention, then I have to understand why and who and what. So yeah. Yeah, I never start with a culture. I don't create a culture and then find a character in it. The character is an embodiment of the culture, and the character feels the culture to me.
And it feels so much that way. And it makes so much sense that you're saying this is how you develop your book, because it's a kind of adventure, and yet it's an adventure so deeply bound up with the characters and what the characters believe and what the characters want to do.
Yes.
And for science fiction fantasy, it's so character driven.
Yeah. I'm definitely, all of my books are character driven. Yeah, I mean, that I would say that, and I'm a playwright as well. And I think I'm character driven as a playwright or as a screenwriter. So I'm really interested in the arc of the character. So in theater we call it a happy idea. So I'm not as much as interested in the happy idea as I am in the character. So like Lysistrata, I mean, this is, the happy idea is, what if all the women said, we're not going to, have sex with you until you stop fighting, right? And that's a great idea. And then you develop the whole play around that, and the characters are actually, in the service of that happy idea. And so it's more about, the humor of that idea and the politics of that idea and the satire of that. And I rarely, I have an idea, so I'm often, like I said, an image. And, I was definitely, when I began the book, I had just read an article about the Mississippi Delta just sort of wasting away into the ocean.
Mm.
So that was sort of my happy idea, but I didn't know what to do with that, and I saw it was just there. And then I got the idea of the poison desert. Um, and then I needed to know, I still didn't know the culture. That was more almost a little bit of science. Here's the science. Okay, so who's responding to this event?
Mm.
And then I could build a world. So definitely character driven.
Yeah. It felt as though it were set in Africa, and it, because of some of the things that come into it.
Yeah, so for me, I'm making up this world, so we can,
Mhm.
but my references were Africa and the diaspora.
Mm.
So we have elephants, which, you know, generally speaking, I don't know, they tried to get them over the Alps, but I don't think that worked. But in the Mediterranean, in Asia. I was thinking of the African elephant, which has two finger bones in its nostril. So the African elephant is, and the Asian elephant only has one sort of finger bone. I'm calling them finger bone. I don't, it's just me
Mhm.
referring to myself to explain an elephant. But elephants are very dexterous. They can pick up things,
Mm.
like peanut shells. They're really amazing. And the African ones have two. So I use them as the reference. I have an elephant character, and she's got two finger bones. So I'm using Africa as a big resource, particularly West Africa, because I've done research on West Africa. So I'm using the landscape, the as a reference. This isn't Africa or West Africa, but I'm using that, and then I'm using my knowledge and experience with the music from West Africa, the theater from West Africa, the masks, the dances, the religion, the Orisha worship of the Yoruba or the Ifa of the Fawn, or the Igbo religion with an amazing mother goddess figure. So I'm using that as a major reference, but also the diaspora. So I'm using the Caribbean because they're pirates and islands, and you can like go from the mainland to other places. And I actually used the coast of California as a map when I was looking at the map, and I was looking at where the mountains are, where the ocean is, where the deserts is, so I used that geography. I was like, oh, let me look at this. As opposed to the coast of West Africa, which had different things going for it. And I also use indigenous American references. So I spent a lot of time at the Museum of the American Indian, and I was looking at a lot of material culture. And again, the masks, the references to, like cosmology and spirits. I love, if you haven't gone to the Museum of the American Indian in Washington, go. It's absolutely unbelievably wonderful. And I've been researching all of this stuff since I was about 14. So I've spent years reading, about various peoples all over the world and about particularly their performance traditions. So sacred clowns appear in all of these traditions. So you can find sacred clowns in West Africa. You can find among the Lakota the sacred clowns who ride backwards into battle. Or you can find griots in West Africa who perform rather than battle. They like do can I be a better storyteller than you rather than have a war. I was using things like that, or the women warriors from everywhere, but particularly the Fawn of West Africa,
Mm.
who are amazing. And oh my gosh, And so I use them as, and I use them in another book of mine, We'll Do Magic for Small Change, which takes place actually in part of it takes place in West Africa, and the fawn are, significant part of that. So I'd done that research. So I could think of them when I was thinking of all of these characters. And the women are very powerful in the fawn empire. So there's the king, and then there are his women. And they're they're like, oh, like, I don't know, the council group, and they're in charge of men who go out and do things, but they're the closest advisors to the king, and they're also his bodyguard and his warriors, and they're all, quote, married to him, end quote. He has women who are of his bed, and then women who are in his council, but they all get the same name, which we unfortunately translate as wife. But wife has different connotations for us.
Mm-hmm. Are we stuck? We're stuck. Maybe I'm just stuck.
No, she's stuck.
She's stuck. Okay.
I've had uneven sound, and I'm not sure if you all are hearing the uneven sound too.
I'm
hearing okay.
A little background roar.
I was getting, it would stop like that on a word,
Yeah.
and then it would catch up again. So what she's saying is utterly fascinating.
It is.
Indeed.
I want you to get her back.
Andrea.
We've lost her completely.
Good. She went off. She went off. She'll come back.
I hope she comes back.
Yeah. Oh, yes. She'll be back. We haven't even heard her read from Master of Poisons yet.
It's true.
We haven't gotten to the meat of the matter yet.
Yes. Let me.
And the kittens are in their hour of perpetual motion before they crash again. So one has already climbed up me and jumped off. I don't know if there will be more. They're out in the hall just outside this room.
Let me double check and make sure that.
I won't do that again. It's not very sightly.
Nope. Oh, come on, Andrea. She'll be back. And if not, we'll get her on another day. But she'll be back. I'll give her a call. So we'll do that again. You were talking about their place, the mistranslation of their place as wives.
Yeah, so yeah, the English has different connotations for the term wife. Better, I mean, there's no one word because we don't accept in English. The people who are in your family who are part of your ruling entity, so we don't have a word for that. And it's this, the word that you also use for your wife, the way we use that word. So I was just drawing all of that in and using that and allowing my imagination to think of, other worlds that could have, as many differences as, any of our worlds, right? So, I didn't want to have like the mono world where you only have one, like you go to a fantasy land or a planet somewhere and they have one culture. So I wanted to have as much variation as possible. So I was referencing a lot of different groups in my mind as I was trying to think of what the people that I was creating were about, and what did they mean to one another, and how did they see their place in the whole universe.
Mm-hmm.
That's
And
and that took a lot of time too. So, and then figuring out how to get that into fiction and have it be fun, and to be consistent and to make sure I knew everything. So that definitely wasn't going to happen in a novella.
yeah, I really like that some of the masters were women.
Yes.
And
Uh, right. So the women, particularly, I think one of the things that we often think, here in the West is that, only, well, those poor women back then in some culture, they had no power. Um, because we had so little power, so they must be like us. And in
yeah,
fact, how power was, distributed, is very different. It's not all the same. So among the Igbo, for instance, who are again West African in what is now Nigeria, they had a very strong group of women. Thinking of Lysistrata, they would say, okay, we're going to gather together and figure out what we think about things. And this guy over here is really being an idiot. So, and we'll go talk to him, or no, we'll ask the men to go talk to him. And they're not talking to him. Okay, we're going to all leave. We're going to leave the village. We're going to take any baby in our arm, and we're going to go down there. And we're not coming back until you get that guy to quit, having his goats run around and eat up everything and crap all over all of our stuff. And the Igbo had ad hoc meetings, so they would have a meeting, and men talked more than the women, but if the women didn't agree, it couldn't happen. So the women would then, the sort of leader woman would say, we don't like that. We're not doing that. And they had to actually listen to them. So this was part of the shared power. So the women as a group had a huge amount of power. Individual women didn't have as much power as individual men. And there's a famous thing that happened in the 20th century, the Woman's War. Women would declare war on men, but this was a theatrical war. So what they would do is they would go around with their their cooking devices, and they would spout poetry about how bad you were, how terrible you were. You were terrible in bed. You were no good at anything. I don't even like you. And we might even burn your house down if you were doing things that were wrong, right? So when the British came, they did that to the British, and the British were like, what are these crazy women? What are they doing? And the Igbo men were like, oh yeah, no, they're doing, women's war. It's like, you got to put up with it. And the British were like, they felt threatened because they didn't see it as performative. Like the women were performing their, like, we are not happy with what you are doing and you must change. And the British shot at them. And it was like, everyone was, because it was cultural, like, woo, the British shot at them, and everybody was so distressed because, what do you mean? You shooting at the women when they're doing women's war? What's wrong with you? But this was a big, turning point in terms of relationships, between the Igbo, the British, and ruling it, because the idea was like, let's take power away from these women, and you men will go along with us on that, right? And then we can put them down. So that it was because of Western incursion that the Igbo women lose some of their power. And this happens a lot of places because the women were viewed as uncivilized because they weren't, Victorian 19th century women types. They were like, no, the Fawn women, when they weren't fighting, they were like, I don't take orders from anybody but the king, one person. No man is over me, and nobody, you don't get to talk to me. And so they were viewed as unruly women by the Europeans, who were obviously uncivilized and obviously wild women that we need to contain. But they were used to having their power and negotiating in their terms, just the way Europeans, women had power there too. It's like false that, we think they had none. But we cover it up, and the anthropologists, of course, weren't talking to women. So when they write up the stories of these people, they don't reference whatever power structures women had, the grouping of women, all of that. So that research really also informed, you know, researching market women, Sunday society, which is Mende women, Igbo women, Fon women. They all had amazing and all different, right? So it's not monoculture. Ways of having power and achieving what they needed in their societies. And you can also find that among indigenous people in the US. So the same thing, the women sat on the council, you know, like, wait a minute, like, we're not doing that. You have to ask us. So, and also when I was younger, someone like, what is her name? Like Wilma Mankiller, you know, a chief, you know, like a chief with a name like that. You're like, whoa, okay.
Yeah,
Let me like
amazing.
let me shift how I think about women in power. So that influence, you know, the women having, you know, much more power than the narratives we would like to think about. Our notion of squaws, you know, that really awful notion, stereotype that we have as you know, I don't even, I refuse to think about that. So I'm going to throw that away. But you know, really trying to get at how people over time in different places have negotiated gender and power. So that, you know, I even have a vasen, which is not male or female gender.
Yes.
And that you can find among many different groups. So among the Igbo, you had a woman who could have a dream and decide, I will now dress as a man. You have Burdash. So you have among indigenous people, you know, more than one or two or three or four different genders. All of that influenced how I like built the culture and the society.
I could listen to this forever, but I would love to hear your, I think we'd all love to hear some reading from the book.
So I didn't know how long were you thinking?
Let me see, we have about 20 minutes.
Okay, so what I thought I would do is I would read the very first page because I like the first page, and then I would read a little bit from the second chapter.
Okay.
So that we get both points of view. And then, you know, I'll try to stop at a good spot in the chapter 2. Okay?
So
yeah.
Master of Poisons.
Yes, this is chapter 1. Jola. We are more likely to deny truth than admit grave error and change our minds. Even in the face of overwhelming evidence or imminent destruction, we refuse to believe in any gods but our own. Who can bear for the ground to dissolve under their feet and the stars to fall from the sky? So we twist every story to preserve our faith. Jola thought to steer the Archesian Empire away from this terrible yet mundane fate. He was 43, handsome, fearless, arrogant even, the master of poisons, and second to none in the Archesian Empire except Emperor Azizi. When Poison Desert appeared in the barbarian South and the free Northland, didn't he warn Azizi? For 20 years, as it crept through river valleys and swallowed forests, Jola pleaded with counsel and begged good Empire citizens to change their ways. But as long as sweet water fell from the sky every afternoon and mist rolled in on a night wind, everybody promised to change tomorrow or next week. Then crops failed and rivers turned to dust. Good citizens now feared change would make no difference, or was, in fact, impossible. Who could fight the wind? So that's the beginning of the book, and You have to get the book to find out what Joel then decides to do. This is chapter 2. And I'll just read a little bit of this. When Awa was a 12-year-old garden sprite, green elders declared Smokeland a true realm of vision and spirits. Awa and the other sprites were not to fear or make fun of sacred space like most people did. Smokeland was a vast territory of possibilities and maybe nots, but never very far from what was happening right now. Smoke walkers were intrepid adventurers exploring the unknown, dream tinkerers who shifted the shape of every day. Awa never told the Green Elders or anybody, but she'd become a Smokeland believer at 6. Whenever Mother's spirit faded away like smoke on the wind, Awa held tight Mother's breath body, sometime for hours. Awa told herself stories, or talked to bees and wild dogs until Mother returned from Smokeland with herbs from nowhere in this world. Awa hugged cold from Mother's thoughts, shook dead weight from Mother's bones, and combed fearful snarls from her wiry hair. Watching over Mother's breath body was a lot to ask of a young daughter who had snarls and sorrows of her own. Awa's older brothers would have felt duty-bound to report a smoke-walking witch woman to Father. Being a good Empire citizen, Father would have turned Mother in to the high priest in Holy City or killed her to avoid shame. So guarding her breath body during illicit adventures fell to Awa. Mother and other smoke walkers reported slogging through a border realm of enchanting freaks and monsters. Before entering Smokeland proper, they were harassed by lightning bolts and spears of fire. Jellyfish explosions and poison dust cyclones were also common. Worst was a cold, dark emptiness that seeped through skin, erasing thought, desire, and fear. To survive the border void, smokewalkers often drank a cathedral seed and cloud silk potion to lift their minds above despair. This potion eased the journey, but did not cause it. Even drugged, many people never made it through Smokeland's border realms. Their spirit bodies got lost in the emptiness, or stolen by High Priest Hezron or his conjure. Their breath bodies withered to bone and then dust. Awa thought of it as poison desert of the mind. The first time she wandered to Smokeland was in the company of bees. It was the day before her 12th birthday. She and older brother Kanu had opened an elephant corral left behind by thief lord raiders and let the beasts run free. Angry villagers who wanted to sell the elephants chased after them, but the elephants escaped. Father was outraged. Awa ran away from him and Mother, arguing over true love and some other man's child. Awa followed friend honeybees as they flew sideways into the woods. Which woods, she could never say. The forest surrounding Father's lands was ancient cathedral trees whispering to one another up in the clouds. Bronze-colored bark was dappled with purple moss. Feathery needle leaves started out red and turned green with age. Cathedral roots were as thick as Awa and oozed an oily scent that made her dizzy. In her childish memory, Smokeland terrain got tangled with the everyday. This first time, Awa was disappointed not to find a border of fiends and exploding jellyfish and void smoke. She landed in a field of wild flowers by a cathedral tree grove. She moved at the speed of thought, spinning endlessly around a drop of water as it slid down a leaf. In a blink, she raced from riverbank to valley to rocky peak. A beehive the size of an elephant rested inside a tree trunk cavern. Swarms of workers buzzed about, stingers hot with venom. Dancing distress, they smelled like ripe bananas. Alwa saw no reason for alarm. Trees and bushes were heavy with flowers. The ground was a mosaic of petals. Deep-throated blossoms bulged with fragrant nectar. Inside the hive, the queen pushed an egg from her abdomen into a cell every minute. Workers spit nectar into the queen's mouth. 1,000 nurses buzzed over a developing brood, and drones were fat and frisky. Bee paradise. Sentinel bees clustered around Alwa's mouth. She was afraid they might sting her. Was she the danger? They spit honey and venom on her tongue, a bittersweet concoction, and night fell like a dark curtain. A cold scar moon hung overhead, a desperate lantern in deep dark. Sentinels wagged their butts and buzzed away from the giant hive. Awa flew among 1,000 bees toward Smokeland's border, where flowers dissolved and cathedral trees crumbled into poison sand. The slash of moon dripped blood. Confused bees flew into the ground. They ate their own wings and stung rocks. Faceted eyes clouded over and sparking hearts burned out. 1,000 wings flew ahead of Awa and turned to smoke. She choked. Confronted with the famed horror of the border realm, Awa tried to slow down. She tried to turn back for bee paradise, but she no longer had the speed of thought. Her mind was sluggish terror and then blank as void smoke enveloped her. A taste of the sentinels lingered in her mouth. A stinger caught in a tooth pricked her tongue. Venom flowed from her heart, and she swooned. Father and other good Empire citizens claimed there was no realm of imagination, no true land of visions and spirits. Smokeland was sleepwalking sickness, drunken dreams, or green elder nonsense. That explained tattoos, burnt hair, and the treasures folks brought back from their adventures. Smokewalkers knowing what they shouldn't or couldn't was another matter. Father couldn't explain that away. He just insisted Mother's exotic herbs and concoctions were family secrets. Southern thief lords sold or burned any woman who knew too much. Northern savages sliced smokewalkers from navel to chin to expel demons. Priests and witch doctors poisoned their breath bodies and stole spirit blood to power gate spells or do other conjure. This was a living death. Good Empire citizens locked up smokewalkers to train for priesthood if they were men, or drain as transgressors if they were women. And a Vazen, what the Anawanama Northerners called someone who was neither man nor woman, they had to declare for one or another horrible fate, living as a man or dying as a woman. So Awa returned from her first Smokeland trip to Mother's garden and let the Smokeland knowledge taste sweet on her tongue, and then she swallowed it away quickly, unspoken. That made her muscles lumpy and her joints wobbly. She snorted wisps of border void and felt dizzy. Father was still yelling at Mother about an unruly daughter who'd end up like witchwoman Kiri, wandering a cold mountain, bloody and bitterless, childless and without love. Mother distracted him with a sack of jewels and coins, while Awa struggled back to her everyday self. Okay, I will stop there. Yeah. So that leaves us a little time if you all have any questions or something like that that you want to ask.
I like your cathedral trees.
Ah,
So perfect.
yeah. Yeah, I was, well, I love that image, but I was in Hawaii, and there are these massive, unbelievable trees that are just massive. And then I came back from that and I was on the West Coast and I saw the redwoods and I was like, oh my God. And so then when I got back to Massachusetts and we had our puny little trees, I was like, no, look at them, look, imagine them. And so that's what was on my mind. And I have this bike path where there's these trees and they just go up and up and up and up and up. And I imagine them as the Hawaiian trees or the redwoods, you know, which are, I mean, you can't quite see the top, it feels. So that's my image.
It's a very different world up there.
Yes, and it's different weather, different everything.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
a cloud forest, it's often called. And the trees make the weather, so they maintain their moisture, and so they don't need rain. They hold the clouds, and it's amazing. So that's what I was thinking of. So, and I love those trees.
I just love so many of the details about this world, and I love the beginning. We are more likely to deny truth than admit error and change our minds.
That, you know, that was in my journal one day, and that went along with the poison desert glowing, and I just thought of how, you know, and we only believe in our own gods, whatever they are,
And
how hard it is to admit, like, you know, I don't know, I'm wrong, I made, you know, so that's what was on my mind.
And so it's no surprise, Red, that the desert is coming out of people's thoughts and minds, people's behavior.
Yeah, so those are tied. I really feel we're in a deep, we deny so much, and partly, you know, for sanity, like I must go on. So, you know, the characters to me are us, you know, like I'm one of the deniers. So it's not like they deny and I don't. No, that's, I think, part of the journey of the book for both of the characters. Like, that, you know, what are we doing? You know, not just what are they doing, but what are we doing?
Yeah. What do we have to do about it?
Yeah. So.
And an adventure comes out of their characters.
Yes.
Yeah.
The details of the bees, it was beautiful.
Yeah, I'm allergic to bees.
I am too.
You are too. So I decided, and I love social insects, but I had focused mostly on ants, or termites, or, you know, other creatures. And I was like, you really need to like come back to the bees. And then, you know, I was getting like help the bees, they're dying out, you know, envelopes with a dead bee on it. So I was like, okay. When they do alarm, it smells like bananas. So you know, I'm not making that up. That's their, you know, they communicate with smells. And so and to us, it would smell like bananas. I don't know what it smells like to them. It smells like, oh my God, we got to do something. But it smells like a banana. I have many animal characters in the book, and I did research. Well, I also like animals, so it's like I've been doing this research for a long time. But then okay, let's pick some you don't know as well as some that you do. So it was really fun to investigate more about bees, because I had focused, like I said, on ants as social insects. And I have crows, who I love, so I've been doing crow research forever. And then elephants I've been doing forever, but I decided, no, come on, do the bees. And then the bees became actually, you know, really significant. So it's great to do what you know, as well as ones that you might think, you know, okay, you stay over there, and I'll stay over here.
I have a beehive now in my garden.
Ah,
and
yeah.
it's been very tough the last couple of weeks with all the smoke, because it prevents them from communicating.
Yeah, right.
It affects their pheromones, which
they get very confused and they'll quite
dependent on the bees now. For pollinating everything in the garden. So I'm hoping they're going to make it through the smoke period okay.
Yeah.
We had to feed them, but I'm worried that they've been eating their stored honey that we were
Yeah.
about to
Oh no. Yeah, because they don't, you know, without the scents, they don't quite know, I mean, it's their major
What direction
communication.
to go?
Like where, you know, they do little dances and stuff too, but the scents say, okay, now this, let's get up, let's get going. Okay, go that direction. Okay, see, make a correction. And that's the little waggle dance where they like, okay, fly that way. But to get them all the way to that, you know.
The waggle dance thing is awesome, but
Yeah.
the
No,
smell
no,
is
but that's like a mind, that's like a, you know, like it's, you know, 3 degrees over there, as opposed to, come on, guys, we're going out, we're gonna go get the food, you know. You need the sense. I mean, you know, they know what to do for one another because of that. And the smoke is just,
yeah, I
wow.
don't know what's going to happen with the bees here. I'm just hoping they can hang on till the rainy season starts and the fire season ends, or I should say, the mudslide season starts after the fire season ends.
When is the mudslide season?
Roughly October,
Ah,
but
okay.
some years it's quite late, like December or even January.
Oh, no. Oh, yeah, okay.
We're praying hard for rain.
Yes, okay.
The mudslide season is about when you have heavy rains everywhere.
So what happens, it's a very nice ecology here. It rains well in a given year, and that means the vegetation grows. So when the rains stop in May and everything dries up, we get the fire season, which after a good rain year turns into a good fire year. So we have fires everywhere. When the vegetation burns off, there's nothing holding the soil on the hillsides in place. So when the rains start, they don't even have to be that big. The hillsides start moving as they get saturated. Fortunately, that means that we get more vegetation, which eventually holds the hillsides in place again, but that gives fuel for the next year's fire. It's a great cycle.
It is. And it would work out pretty well if there weren't just these houses in the way.
People are sort of the problem. If we would just leave, nature seems to do quite well without us.
Yeah.
And there are, yeah, wow. Yeah. Just building on some of those places has made it hard to, you know, yeah, right, because you can't depend on whether you're going to have a moderate year of everything, which would be nice. Wow.
And assuming that there has been some change in climate for whatever reason,
Yeah.
people who built houses in areas that weren't affected by various things are now in the path of those things, not
Yeah.
through any fault of their own.
Right, right,
But
right.
human beings tend to think, oh, nothing happened here in the last 50 years. I can build this nice house right on the San Andreas Fault because it's not going anywhere.
Yeah,
Right.
right.
We have really short short attention spans. Like we think, oh, I've lived 70 years. I know what's up here, as opposed to geological time, right? You know, that's another.
Yes, and we're 10th in geological time, and we're finding that out sometimes to our shock and horror again.
Uh-huh.
We're brief.
Nothing's happened since 1753. We're fine.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
That was lovely. I was
really
thinking
lovely.
we're reading that I hope the book gets into an Audible version.
There is going to be an Audible version.
And are you going to do the reading?
No, they've got 2 voice actors.
Okay, 'cause I was very impressed with how well you read. Not
Yes.
not everyone can both write well and read well, and you did both.
Thank you. I am a theater person, so I pour libation to all my acting teachers who struggle with me because I didn't actually want to be an actor. I wanted to be a director or a writer. But I did do the voice work with them and did all the exercises. So they were, you know, I feel blessed that I, you know, took those classes and took them seriously. So
Well, we are blessed that we got you to come and read.
yes, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here, and congratulations on Master of Poison.
Yep, and please get it at a local bookstore if you can.
Of
So
course.
support your local economy, support your local bookstore because we want them to still be standing when this is all like an interesting memory.